I'm Josh Klein.
And I'm Elise Hugh.
We host a podcast from Accenture called Built for Change.
Every part of every business is being reinvented right now. That means companies are facing brand new pressures to use fast evolving technologies and address shifting consumer expectations.
But with big changes come even bigger opportunities. We've talked with leaders from every corner of the business world to learn how they're harnessing change to totally reinvent their companies.
And how you can do it too.
Subscribe to Built for Change now so you don't miss an episode.
Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, winter is coming, or rather it's here officially. Today is the first day of our cold weather season, according to the county's timeline for when they typically open overflow beds for folks who might need overnight shelter. And last week, county officials suggested they're ready. But if you account for all the shelter space that we've lost in the last year, it seems stickier than maybe that one press release would have us believe. We're with a journalist from Public Source who's been on the ground. It's Wednesday, November 15th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh is talking about. I'm with photojournalist Stephanie Strasberg. It's so good to see and hear you today.
Thanks so much for taking the time to talk with me about all this.
Of course. Well, let's get up to speed. Today is November 15th. Why is this day so important in regard to our county's winter shelters?
So in the Pittsburgh area, in Allegheny County, November 15th is traditionally the day that winter shelter and overflow spaces open up. Certain cities handle winter differently, like in DC, for example, it's local law that if temps hit below 32 degrees, every person has a right to shelter. Some places like Pittsburgh tend to pick a season. For us, it's normally November 15th to March 15th. And this time last year, around November 15th, we saw the opening of two significant places. One was the basement space at Smithfield United Church of Christ. It opened as emergency overflow on November 15th because the highly anticipated 2nd Avenue Commons, which was supposed to open earlier in 2022, was delayed in opening. And so that building opened November 22nd, and it filled up really fast. I've heard some estimates it was full by the end of the day, definitely by the end of the week. So while the opening of that new building added 95 shelter beds and 40 overflow beds in the downstairs cafeteria, Smithfield ended up remaining open through the winter because the need was just so high.
And I can see why. I mean, it's been really frigid in Pittsburgh overnight for the last couple of weeks here off and on. For the last few years, where have people gone in the winter if they're not lucky enough to nab one of the beds at, say, the Smithfield space or something like it?
So there are shelters across the county that are available to people year-round, and some of those shelters open overflow space in the winter. So historically, I think a lot of us hear about Light of Life on the north side and East End Cooperative Ministries in East Liberty. They'll open some overflow beds. They have 20 each. And so now with 2nd Avenue Commons in Uptown, there's 40 overflow beds there. The 20 in East Liberty, the 20 on the North Shore, that makes about 80 overflow beds. But for the past 25 years, the biggest bulk of winter overflow has been the basement space at Smithfield United Church of Christ in the heart of downtown. And if you're not able to secure any of those, people end up outside. People end up finding safety, in communities, clustering groups of tents together. Some people stay in cars, some people stay on relatives' couches while they can. But I think especially this past year, we've seen definitely more encampments spring up as the numbers of homelessness post-pandemic went up.
Yeah, and of course the Smithfield shelter is closed now. I know you were there when they officially shuttered it. Can you kind of describe their relationship with our Unhoused and why it went away the way it did?
So the people at Smithfield United Church of Christ have opened up their basement space for the past 25 years, and they see it as part of their mission as people who follow Jesus and follow God. And this past year, Smithfield was definitely in the news more as the numbers went up there, I think more than other years. Normally, it's slated to have space for 50 men and 20 women, but in this past year, it was definitely very, very full, perhaps over that from any estimate. And part of that reason is that it's a low barrier shelter. So when other spaces were turning people away, either because people weren't comfortable with giving the information that needed to be given, or they didn't have the information, sometimes you need to provide some kind of ID. Not everybody, especially if you've been living on the street for a while, has that ID or feels comfortable giving their full name or feels comfortable giving their social security number and things like that. So this was a very few questions asked space. As long as you were an adult, it was not a space for children.
Right.
So it became a popular space because as the other spaces were full up, if you were newly experiencing homelessness, or if you were somebody struggling with substance use or other mental health challenges, you knew you were going to be accepted there. And the numbers spoke to that being a popular approach.
When it's since been closed, of course, does Smithfield have any say about whether they'd be able to open this winter if indeed we do end up needing more space?
John Colburn, the parish administrator at Smithfield United Church of Christ, said that they haven't heard anything from Allegheny County DHS for the past 2 months. He said, quote, "Will the shelter open at Smithfield Street Church?" And he said, "Crickets and chirps, all I got." So last time that they opened Smithfield last year, they really only got a 72-hour notice. So I think we were all kind of waiting to the end there to publish because we thought, are they at the last minute going to reopen that space? John Colburn, again, he said that they're not opposed to housing the shelter. It definitely fits into their mission. And they saw that there was a need for what he was referring to as 140 people who were at the Smithfield shelter nightly last season. So he feels like they have the space, that it is a blessing to have the space. And so they would listen to a request from the county, but they can't obviously do it on their own.
What is it that they need? Is it support staff? Is it funding to be able to provide for folks? Is it a combination?
Sure. So what the way that it works is, in this situation, the Smithfield United Church of Christ provides the space, and then the county will seek a provider to operate that space. And so the provider is not paid by the church, but paid through the county. In the past, the space has been operated by different providers, and those have included Pittsburgh Mercy, Community Human Services, and before it operated as a winter overflow shelter, Bethlehem Haven, which is now a well-known women's shelter, actually started in that space before it was even the winter shelter. This past year, it was operated by Team PSBG, which is headed up by Aubrey Plesh. These are not county employees. These are not church employees. These are people who are trained separately to be providers to this very complex population, who are then hired through the county to operate that particular space.
I'm Josh Klein.
And I'm Elise Hugh.
We host a podcast from Accenture called Built for Change.
Every part of every business is being reinvented right now. That means companies are facing brand new pressures to use fast evolving technologies and address shifting consumer expectations.
But with big changes come even bigger opportunities. We've talked with leaders from every corner of the business world to learn how they're harnessing change to totally reinvent their companies.
And how you can do it too.
Subscribe to Built for Change now so you don't miss an episode.
This episode is brought to you by Klaviyo, the platform that powers smarter digital relationships. With Klaviyo, you can activate all your customer data in real time, connect seamlessly with your customers across all channels, guide your marketing strategy with AI-powered insights, recommendations, and automated assistance, deliver experiences that feel individually designed at scale, and grow your business faster. Power smarter digital relationships with Klaviyo. Learn more at klaviyo.com/Spotify. That's KLAVIYO.com/Spotify.
So for Smithfield, the county is just the conduit. I want to talk about some of our city or county's other spaces. What's the capacity like in them? Like, I want to get into the math. Like, how many beds do we have for folks countywide, citywide? How do we calculate that?
So with the recent addition of Second Avenue Commons, which added 95 shelter beds, and when it's needed, 40 overflow spaces, in addition to some SROs, which are actually operated separately. Those are single room occupancy units. Those are almost, it's akin to an apartment for one person. That's basically one room. With that recent big addition, and with the addition of Unity Recovery in Homewood, which was a smaller amount of SROs, and a few added in a couple other places where they were able to squeeze in some more beds, there are roughly 370 year-round shelter beds in Allegheny County. And when we add in overflow, there's an additional 80 overflow beds. So what the county is offering this winter is roughly 450 beds. Now, what they've said in the press release that came out since we published our story, it came out in a couple hours after our story, that said if the roughly 370 year-round shelter beds and 80 overflow beds were to reach capacity, or if there was something like happened at Second Avenue Commons over last Christmas where a shelter had to be closed or people had to leave due to a utilities issue, an emergency facility will be activated. And if people show up to Second Avenue Commons, they're going to be transported to this emergency location. However, when we followed up, the county wouldn't specify the location of the emergency facility, and they wouldn't say specifically how many beds that emergency facility will have. But they did confirm that that emergency facility will not be the Smithfield United Church of Christ basement.
So we have 450, including overflow. Let's start there, I guess. Is that enough for the need, at least based on the estimates we have?
What we're hearing from everybody on the ground right now, from people who are operating shelter spaces, people who are living in shelter spaces, and people who want to be living in shelter spaces, is that things are pretty full already. And this is from our research being done pre-winter. Without the addition of those 70 plus beds that Smithfield United Church of Christ has allowed in the past, with the increase in number of people experiencing homelessness, especially street homelessness, we do expect that Pittsburgh can anticipate there's going to be a lot of people on the streets this winter compared to other winters. And people who work street outreach, who have been talking to us and that I've been going out with, have said, yeah, they're receiving requests for blankets, for tents, for sleeping bags, for hats, for gloves, for hand warmers, and people are really preparing to spend this winter sleeping outside.
How does the county decide when to open these emergency severe weather spaces? Like, what conditions do we have to unlock these additional beds?
Yeah, we directly asked them that, and the feedback that we got back was extreme weather and extreme precipitation. When I asked again what temperature that was or what specifically that looked like, we didn't hear back. And my question is, like, while the county and city have this plan for winter's harshest nights, I mean, I have to ask, is normal dangerous just fine? We should just leave
30
people
degrees
out there.
sitting outside for a few minutes is uncomfortable for anyone, even if you're dressed appropriately and, bundled up or in a warm space.
As winter gets here and people are used to being able for the past 25 years to go to those church steps and show up and be pretty much guaranteed a bed, it's just going to be hard to see what happens this winter.
It kind of seems like our city is most comfortable if they don't have to see it, but isn't maybe thinking as critically as they need to about what it means to safely house people in any condition. I feel like we've seen this conversation play out all year, but now it's getting much more dangerous as the temperatures drop.
And I think what's really tough is even people who are accessing the system, they're being told there's not space already. And when we spoke to Light of Life, we reached out to them, they said the numbers that we're seeing come in are a lot of women fleeing domestic violence situations, a lot of women with children and families, and a lot of seniors. So while street homelessness presents like a certain way, there's also all of this stuff that goes unseen. And
lots of folks who may not seek this help if they don't feel like there's somewhere they can flee to.
Yeah. Or be accepted the way that they are.
Exactly.
And so I think, the other thing is our housing market and the cost of things have really changed. So what might have been an affordable apartment at like $675 a month a couple of years ago is now supposed to be affordable at $800 a month. But when you're living in economic insecurity, that's a pretty significant, if your wages haven't gone up or if you have a disability that prevents you from having a job, that's tough.
Stephanie, thank you so much. We really appreciate your reporting.
Thanks for having me.
If you or someone you know is experiencing housing insecurity or homelessness, you can contact the Allegheny Link. Their number is 1-866-730-2368. And if you visit them online, there's also a bunch of resource guides there that list groups already doing this work if your heart is set on donating or volunteering your time. That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you're liking the show, please tell someone, rate us, leave us a nice review, and make sure you're subscribed to our Hey Pittsburgh newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you soon. Journalist math is so hard.
Yeah.